Brazil is one of the richest countries on earth. Rich in natural resources, in culture, in creativity, and in potential. But here's the twist. Most Brazilians have never really seen that wealth. On paper, Brazil looks impressive. It's the 9th largest economy in the world, bigger than Russia's, Canada's, and almost all of Latin America combined. And yet it's also one of the most unequal places on the planet. A country where helicopters fly over neighborhoods that still don't have proper sewage, where the same street can host a luxury cafe selling $8 cappuccinos and a food store serving $2 lunches. It's a land of abundance and contradiction. And the strangest thing? None of this is really new. Inequality in Brazil is so old that it feels normal, like part of the landscape. But how did we get here? How can a country so rich keep so many of its people poor? When we talk about inequality in Brazil, we're not just talking about income. It's about opportunities or the lack of them. The neighborhood where you're born can decide how far you'll go in life. In some parts of São Paulo, life expectancy can reach over 80 years. In others, just a few kilometers away, people barely make it past 60. Same city, different worlds. You can see it everywhere, in schools with leaking roofs and universities that compete with the best in the world, in buses packed every morning while SUVs glide past, in a health system that can perform heart transplants for free, but also let millions wait months for basic exams. This is Brazil's contradiction, a country with islands of excellence floating in an ocean of inequality. And the most painful part is that many people have learned to see it as normal. They call it jeitinho brasileiro, that clever way of getting by. But often, it's not cleverness, it's survival. For decades, Brazil has grown economically, while leaving millions behind. The result? A nation that's rich on average, but poor in practice. If Brazil is so unequal, then where does all the money come from? The short answer: from a bit of everything. Brazil is an economic giant built on 3 main pillars: agribusiness, natural resources, and services. The country feeds the world. Soybeans, beef, coffee, sugar, orange juice, you name it. Brazil exports it, usually in huge quantities, and very little processing. Then there's mining and oil, especially the pre-salt fields off the Atlantic coast, one of the largest oil reserves on the planet. Add to that a service sector that makes up more than half of the country's GDP, from finance and tourism to millions of small informal jobs. It sounds like a lot, and it is. Brazil has one of the most diversified economies in the developing world. It produces planes and rockets, runs advanced agricultural research, and hosts global tech startups. But here's the catch. Most of this wealth is concentrated in very few hands. The profits of the boom rarely trickle down. The soy farm that exports millions might employ just a handful of workers. The oil field that fuels the country's GDP might not even bring paved roads to the town next to it. So yes, Brazil is rich, but it's a kind of wealth that doesn't spread, it accumulates. And that, more than anything, defines the Brazilian economy. To understand Brazil's inequality, you have to go back, way back. From the very beginning, the country was designed to concentrate wealth. When the Portuguese arrived in the 1500s, they didn't come to build a nation. They came to extract value. Land was divided into huge estates, handed to a handful of families loyal to the crown. Millions of indigenous people were enslaved or displaced, and when that wasn't enough labor, Africans were brought by force, over 4 million of them. Brazil received more enslaved Africans than any other country in the Americas. For more than 3 centuries, slavery wasn't a side note of the economy, it was the economy. When slavery finally ended in 1888, the last country in the Western world to abolish it, there was no compensation, no land reform, no integration. The formerly enslaved were simply told, "You're free now, good luck." Meanwhile, the same families that owned the land kept it. That legacy still shapes Brazil today. A small elite controls vast rural and financial empires, while millions struggle to survive in the cities that grew out of migration and neglect. Inequality here isn't accidental. It's historical engineering, a system built centuries ago that never really got dismantled. Fast forward to the 20th century, a new Brazil was being built. After centuries of plantations and export crops, the country finally began to industrialize. Getulio Vargas in the 1930s created state companies, labor laws, and a sense of national development. Then came Juscelino Kubitschek, promising to achieve 50 years of progress in 5. Brasilia was built, highways spread across the country, and the middle class was born, or at least the dream of one. In the 1960s and 70s, the so-called economic miracle under the military dictatorship made Brazil one of the fastest growing economies in the world. But it was a miracle with fine print. Wages were frozen, unions were silenced, and the benefits of growth went mostly to the top. The economy expanded, but inequality did too. Cities exploded with migrants from the countryside looking for work. They found jobs, yes, but also overcrowded neighborhoods, poor infrastructure, and few public services. By the 1980s, Brazil was a fully urban nation with rural problems transplanted into the city. The factories and skyscrapers look modern, but the social structure underneath? Still colonial. Progress had arrived, but justice hadn't. Today's Brazil is full of contradictions that make perfect sense, if you've been paying attention. It's a country of billion-dollar startups and food delivery workers who can't afford lunch, of booming agribusiness and empty place, of 5G networks and neighborhoods without clean water. Brazil has entered the digital age, but inequality came along for the ride. The economy has changed shape. The factories of the 1970s gave way to fintechs, app-based jobs, and the so-called gig economy. For some, that means flexibility and innovation. For many others, it means insecurity and exhaustion. Meanwhile, the same traditional engines of the economy, oil, mining, agriculture, still dominate exports. They make Brazil look wealthy on paper, but their profits rarely translate into social mobility. In the 21st century, Brazil built a modern economy on an ancient foundation. You can buy a smartphone in 12 installments, but you can't trust the bus to arrive on time. And somehow, that sentence sums up modern Brazil better than any statistic. If everyone knows the problem, why doesn't it change? Because inequality isn't just economic, it's political, institutional, and even cultural. Brazil has one of the most complex tax systems in the world, and one of the most unfair. The poor pay more, relatively speaking, than the rich. Interest rates are sky high, credit is expensive, and bureaucracy moves at the speed of paper. Then there's education. Public schools that underperform for decades make it almost impossible to break the cycle. And a labour market that rewards connections more than merit keeps opportunity locked in certain circles. For centuries, Brazil has normalized inequality. It's in the way we talk, in how we see each other, in the quiet assumption that some people just belong higher than others. And while millions struggle to climb, a small elite sits comfortably on top, with little incentive to change a system that works perfectly for them. In Brazil, inequality isn't just tolerated, it's designed to endure. Brazil is a rich country, not just in numbers, in beauty and talent, in creativity. But wealth isn't the same as prosperity. A country isn't rich because of what it has, it's rich because of what it shares. And that's where Brazil still falls short. For 5 centuries, the country has created incredible wealth and kept most of it in the same few hands. The good news is that none of this is inevitable. Inequality was built by people, and anything built can be rebuilt. Brazil has the resources, the knowledge, and the imagination to change. Hi, I'm Dan, and this was another episode of Brazil and Beyond. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and reach more people. And tell me in the comments, do you think Brazil will ever turn its wealth into real equality? Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.